Today, I continue my conversation with remarkable women of the Middle East. I introduce you today to Aalia Thobani.
We ended up leaving Kenya and moving to Dubai. That ended up being a pretty good move for us, and Dubai is definitely home. Unfortunately, when I was 11, my father passed away suddenly from a heart attack.
Probably the most difficult age to lose a father.
Along my journey, I met an amazing psychologist. She was able to pinpoint it and say, Aalia, you're grieving the death of your father. And I was like, wow. I mean, yeah. Well, my invitation is to actually say, okay, use that time to put the phone down and join in the play with your child. Instead of trying to follow your passion or find your passion, instead follow your curiosity and explore, what makes you happy as well.
Welcome back. Today, I continue my conversation with remarkable women of the Middle East. Remarkable, as I always remind you, it's not just about the impact that those women have had on the region, but it's also about how far they've come, the challenges they had to overcome. I think remarkable truly is mostly about the journey, not the destination that we arrive at. And my guest today is an incredible example of that. She is originally born in Canada, grew up in Kenya, and moved to Dubai many years ago to basically live a life that was very much in line with her passion. Most of us don't get that opportunity. She, at a very young age, realized that she likes cognitive science, she likes learning and development, and so she had a dual master in Northwestern University in Illinois to study both, basically, and worked in the US for a while and then returned to Dubai to focus on first on speech therapy and basically dealing with children with learning disabilities, and then eventually ended up expanding her teaching, if you want, to also include moms and others, as a matter of fact. So basically adults and children, regardless, if you need to learn something in terms of your needs for a life coach or your needs for improving your speech, Aalia has helped hundreds, thousands of those in her career. Turns out that she's also the wife of one of my best friends. So that's Irfan. Hey, nice to meet you, man. But mostly, actually, I found that her commitment and dedication to what she does is truly remarkable. So I introduce you today to Aalia Thobani. Aalia, so first of all, thank you. We've been waiting for this for a while. It's finally here. And I'm very grateful that you gave me the time. I want to start with an observation. Mostly, those who have interest in psychology or cognitive science and so on, I say mostly, no generalization there, are those who have had a need for those things growing up. And I know from your story that your childhood was a little bit, let's say, unpredictable. Would you want to start there and tell me a little bit about your story?
Sure. Thank you so much, Mo. It's such a pleasure to be here and to be meeting you in person. I've heard so much about you. I've read your book, or at least begun to read your book, and I'm in the process of reading it, and listen to your podcast as well. So it's really an honor to be here. Thank you so much. So my journey, yes, it begins in Kenya. Even though I was born in Canada, I grew up in Nairobi. That was home. And my dad grew up in Uganda because that's where his family was for 3 or 4 generations. And then because of the better education and healthcare in Kenya, we were in Kenya and he was in Uganda. So he would be commuting back and forth. And that's where I grew up, and, surrounded by nature and greenery. It was just the most beautiful place to be, really.
I love Kenya.
It is.
My I shouldn't be saying that, but definitely my favorite African country.
Yeah.
Kenyans are some of my favorite Africans. It's true, 100%. Beautiful smiles, like, oh my God.
Oh yeah, big smiles.
Yeah.
So that really is home. And so I growing up there, and then, unfortunately, when I was 11, just about to be 12, my father passed away suddenly from a heart attack. And that threw our lives into, tumult, basically. So we ended up leaving Kenya 2 years later and moving to Dubai to be closer to my mom's side of the family. And that ended up being a pretty good move for us, I would say. We've been here ever since, and Dubai is definitely home. And it's has a very, very special place in my heart. And the amount that I've been able to accomplish and the amount of impact I've been able to make. And I also say the inspiration and the motivation to think big and to grow big and to do as much as I can comes from being here and the environment and the people and just the government. And I'm just really, really grateful to be here. And so my journey with speech and language. So in Uganda, I have a first cousin. And unfortunately, when she was born normally and at 3, she contracted meningitis. And unfortunately, after that, it ended up affecting, her cognition and her ability to communicate. And I guess for me, that may have been, at least subconsciously, one of the reasons why I wanted to pursue the field. In high school, I'd done a lot of Model United Nations, and I thought I was,
You're one of those.
I'm one of those. I was in The Hague, and I knew that I wanted to, save the world and change the world. And I thought the way to do that would be to join the UN and save the world like that. So I went into university thinking, well, that's what I'm going to do. And the good thing about an American education is you can play around. You can, try things and decide that it's not for you. So I decided I needed something more specific. I wasn't sure what. And then it was a friend of mine who said, well, Aalia, you're such a great teacher. And I was like, I never even thought about that. But as I look back at my life, I'm like, I've always taught. That's what I've always done. And yet I wanted to go into a little bit more the scientific route of teaching. And so, I explored, and I was very lucky that Northwestern had an amazing program it started out as a program in communication sciences and disorders. I did my bachelor's in specifically learning disabilities. And then I ended up pursuing a master's in speech and language pathology and learning disabilities. And that was where I needed to be. And that was my calling. So it's a combination of cognitive science, psychology, and education. And I love learning about the brain. So, yeah.
What you quickly spoke about losing your father at 11, moving here.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that? I mean, it's probably the most difficult age to lose a father.
Yes, I was just about to hit puberty, not the best time. It's never a good time. And that was particularly hard, I would say. So no, not very well. And I think, we all tried, we had some therapy sessions and, but thinking about it, was my mom thrown into this situation with 3 young children, and, some difficulties with family that didn't make it easy. And being a mother now, I really truly understand how hard it may have been for her. But for me, I blocked everyone out. I just locked my door and I just shut the world out. And I stopped eating.
You did?
Yeah. I was anorexic for a year. I thought that, and now I know that it was a way of controlling my environment, controlling what I could manage to. Because there was just so much unknown, right? And also what I realize now after my journey with this is that my sacred wound, a term that they use in psychology, is abandonment. Because me as a little child kind of experiencing sudden death of my father, who died with a smile on his face, which made it worse for me, because I'd always thought that he was happy to leave, So for me, the sacred wound was abandonment. My dad, abandoned me. He left me. And I didn't realize that until much later on. I ended up, coming out of the anorexia, thank goodness. And then, 6 months into my relationship with my current husband, I was triggered by something that he said. And I guess as a consultant, he was leaving a lot. So a lot of in quotation marks, abandonment, right? Because I hadn't dealt with it. So a lot of leaving, and something that he said, or I said to him, and he couldn't say those words back, like, I'm ready, Irfan, I think you're it. And he couldn't say those words back, right? And so that just led me into maybe an 8-month to 12-month long depression, where I was literally in bed crying every day, and I didn't really know why. And, for me, I always try to seek help. I'm really good about that. And I really knew that I was not going mad or crazy. And I knew that it wasn't him. I knew that it wasn't Irfan. I knew that it was my journey and something that was triggered within me. And so I literally asked everyone I could think of for help. I called people who were dealing with, who I know had their own journeys with depression in the past. I called them up and I really just started to figure out, who I should turn to for this kind of support. And along my journey, I met an amazing psychologist who also lives in Dubai at the moment, and her name is Cynthia Gonzalez. And I would say within the first few minutes of me explaining my journey, she was able to pinpoint it and say, Aalia, you're grieving the death of your father. And I was like, wow. I mean, yeah, actually, you're right. That's what's happening.
That's how many years later?
Oh,
15, 16 years later?
Yeah, many years later. And I'd never truly grieved. I just kind of used Band-Aid approaches, and I never felt the feelings, right? And in psychology, we talk about, in this day and age, really sitting with your feelings. And I never really gave myself the opportunity to do that. And so many years later, that's what happened. I guess my subconscious was ready. You spoke about Saturn returns in your previous podcast.
Yeah, with Kagi, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it happened at 28. That's when it happened.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that was my journey. And I ended up taking a year-long transpersonal psychology course with Cynthia and a group of amazing people of all ages from many different parts of the world. And it was the most profound experience ever. Hard, very hard, because you were pulling up all your baggage and all the hard shadows, and you were having to face them every single time. And I was, in the midst of being just super reactive with Irfan, and we were reacting off of each other. It was like a vicious cycle. And through this journey, we ended up, gaining a very, very, very deep understanding of each other, of our relationship. And, as a result, I think it ended up leading to our strength. So it was beautiful.
He's a good man. I mean, I really think that it was worth the pain to keep each other. But tell me about, actually, it's the first time I hear the term sacred wound. What is a sacred wound?
So, we all have pasts, we all have childhoods, nothing is perfect. Our parents are not perfect, right? No situation is perfect. And so as a result of that, when we've experienced something in our childhood that we may not have processed effectively, it ends up becoming part of a wound that, can end up being triggered in relationship. Whether it be relationship as a parent, so with your child, whether it be in relationship with a partner. So that's why, all the research now around parenting is around integration, right? And what does integration mean? It means that we have different systems in our brain, and what would be great, for parents to understand is how to enable our children to integrate their brains. And this is a term by Daniel Siegel, and he's an amazing, he's just incredible. And so integrating the brain, and you can integrate the brain in many different ways. And, and one example of it is if your child is experiencing something or has experienced something traumatic, like, they got, a dog jumped on them. And, from then on, you realize that child may have a fear for dogs because that's an implicit memory.
That's me.
Okay.
I don't fear dogs, but a dog did jump on me in a very violent way when I was 7 or 8. Yeah. And, I still forgive dogs. I think they're cute. But in all honesty, I will tell you openly, I mean, I like to pet them from a bit of a distance. I never prioritized it as as like, my real wound. It's like one of many, so I don't work on it. But does the expression sacred wound means it's one?
Good question. And I'm not a psychologist myself. From my understanding of it is that there is one kind of overarching wound, yeah, that ends up consistently being triggered in your intimate relationships, yeah, with your kids or with your partner or whatever it may be. And it is actually in that process of being triggered where healing can occur. Yeah.
Amazing.
So for me, it was the abandonment. For Irfan, it was something else, right? Kind of the reaction. And so together we healed each other's wounds. Yeah. And actually kind of just going back to that point of even the minor wounds in childhood, it's really important to talk about, what has happened and to try and enable, your child to feel the feelings and name the feelings so that the brain becomes a lot more kind of understanding of the event that happened. So instead of becoming an implicit memory of, I'm scared of dogs and I don't know why, it ends up being, well, I had one experience with a dog and this is what happened and I've processed it and now I can actually build a different relationship with dogs,
If you want to.
If you want to,
I don't
right? You have
want
that choice. Okay.
This is quite observant of you to say, look, I am not crazy. Something was triggered, and then you start to work on it. This definitely, sadly, most adults don't do, but for sure, children don't do. Right. And I, in my personal experience, of course, with my own kids, Aya specifically, where, I remember vividly after many years of trying to connect and understand, she once told me about a specific event where I was not aware at all that this would make her have that reaction. If you think about it, it was some kind of a joke in my mind. I was thinking she will laugh about it, but instead she took it as I don't have the right to express my feelings when I have them, right? Aya is very reflective and she's very good at finding her real self. But it took her many, many, many years until her 20s when she could actually say, Papa, remember when you did this? This made me think that, right? Most kids don't do that at all. And most of your work, at least in the very, until today, actually, most of your work is still with kids. So what happens with kids, especially in the speech, what is it called? Disability?
Well, in fact, I've actually even kind of moving away from the word, even though one of my master's degrees is in learning disabilities, I move away from that word, and that's why I say learning and development.
Okay.
Because to me, it's almost like it's a negative connotation.
I
negative
agree
term,
with that. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And what I like to think about what we do every day, and this is the mission statement for the Developing Child Center as well, is unlocking potential. And
like
unlocking confidence.
I like that. I mean, I've been thinking about this so deeply recently. Actually, you know how spiritual people will always say, healing, we're going to heal. And I think there is a lot of negative connotation. It's almost like you're broken in a way that, I've been thinking there must be a better way to say, finding our potential or becoming free or whatever. So sometimes when we use those words, I think disabilities or even the terminologies themselves, ADD or this or that, they're sort of negative in the way that we position them. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's interesting, right? The whole question of identity, right?
Yes.
Even for us, right? We have so many dysfunctional beliefs that we end up growing up with because of our society and culture and sex and whatever it may be. And then, you end up doing the work, to unravel that and to kind of think, well, what is not serving me anymore, right? And so, even from a young age, when a child is faced with a difficulty, right? And for some, it can be milder. Okay. So where the S is, a child is unable to produce the S. Okay. And for others, it's something that affects, every element of their life because they may have a diagnosis of autism, right? Or another kind of genetic disorder. And, from, the day they were really tiny till, late into adulthood, they're maybe requiring therapy or some kind of help or, service. And so how do you form an identity around that,
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of a story of a young, amazing lady that I've had the privilege of knowing since she was 4. And now she's 18, I would say, and she's in university and in an exceptionally good university. And the journey that we've been on together, where, we started out where we were, doing speech and language therapy to work on, auditory processing skills and connection and social skills and, ability to understand and express herself effectively. And from there, as she moved into her teen years, it really did become a lot about coaching and trying to figure out, well, who am I in the context of, like what I've been through, my identity. And because I've been through this hardship and this process, how can I enable other people to reduce the stigma they see when they see a child who's suffering, and how can I empower other kids who are facing what I'm facing? And so together, we wrote a book.
Oh, did you?
Mostly her, okay? And I was just there to kind of support, edit, etc. So, and that book is, she has it on Amazon. So I'll share the details. I don't want to disclose in case she doesn't feel comfortable with me doing so. But, and it's all about children with various superpowers who have their weaknesses and have their superpowers as well.
I mean, when you think about it, when you say it the way you said it, sorry to say, but it makes me feel that almost every one of us needs to go through that learning, right? I mean, in a very interesting way. It just hit me when you were talking about her abilities at a young age to maybe say things or express herself. I mean, how many people do I know that express themselves horribly, like even hurt themselves because they express themselves really badly, Is it about speech, or is it about also your inner thinking that you're working on?
So I think it's a combination. I will just give you another example, just so you know exactly what a speech therapist does. So Jerry Logeman, who is the founder of dysphagia, which is the study of swallowing, she was at Northwestern, and I had the privilege and the honor of being her student. And when we first arrived, the first day of class, she asked us a question, and she said, "Which would you rather give up, eating or speaking?" And there was a moment of silence in the room because everyone was, contemplating, and they really couldn't make a decision about that, right? And
forever?
Yes, let's say forever. If you had to choose one, Mo, if I asked you that question.
It depends on how old I am. Yeah, in the last year or so, I'd give up eating and just speak everything I know. Otherwise, I wouldn't last that long, right?
Yeah, well, and it's one of those questions that really gets you thinking about the impact a speech and language pathologist has on an individual's life, because that's what we do. We deal with feeding and swallowing, and we deal with speaking and communicating every single day of our lives, right? And so, I think in terms of seeing a speech therapist specifically, it is for usually a particular reason, right? And it could be, like I said, as mild as not being able to produce a sound to very severe as having, a different kind of like a genetic disorder or whatever it may be. And so, I think in the work that I do, and I'm going to give an example of children that I work with who stutter. Yeah. I've had a 15-year-old and actually also a 5-year-old. And at the beginning, I have them draw out their relationship with their stutter. Okay. And the 5-year-old, said, "Well, I hate my stutter. Every day I ask God, why did he do this to me? And I pray to God to take it away from me." Right. A 5-year-old. And then I have another 5-year-old who just is completely oblivious and really doesn't care, right?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and temperament actually plays a very important role when it comes to even the persistence of a stutter. It's actually been scientifically documented, And then I had a 15-year-old who also kind of came in really negative and negative self-image, not really able to voice himself. And through the journey, the curated experiences as well, where I had other stutterers, adult stutterers come in and talk about their journeys And, we go through the different techniques that a child can use to overcome a stutter. And, so that's part of it. Technique is part of it. And then part of it is really about the mindset and about building confidence and acceptance that, this is something that, you may need to deal with for your life. Right. And so how do we come to terms with that? How do we advocate for ourselves? And so that's the whole journey around treating an individual who stutters. Right?
What causes a stutter?
It is, okay, so it's it is actually, they found that there is a neurological element to it. There is a strong family history to it. So the first questions I'll ask a parent is, is there a family history? Is how long has the stutter persisted? So if it's been 2 years, then there's a higher likelihood that it will continue. If the individual is a boy versus a girl, unfortunately, it's also a higher likelihood.
Is that true?
Yes. And for many, actually, learning disabilities as well, it tends to be, something that...
I know being on the autism spectrum is more for boys than it is for girls.
Well, there's also... girls also demonstrate different... it's not the same. When you diagnose a girl versus a boy, there are different elements that you take into consideration that maybe is more new in the research right now. So it could be just the way we're also kind of diagnosing and labeling with autism. Yeah. But certainly for stuttering, it's been proven that a lot more boys will persist. And also temperament plays a role in that too, interestingly enough.
Of course, yeah. It's like you're stressed about it. So
so it creates that cycle.
Yeah.
And kind of going back to...
But does that mean it is a brain wiring? Like it is not a habit. It's not taught by your parents, for example.
No, not at all. So, for example, there is an approach called the Lidcombe approach that is used. I'm trained in it. I don't use it consistently because it is more of a behavioral approach. And from my perspective, I really don't think it is a behavior because they've found that there is a neurological component to it, However, kind of changing our mindset and, working on our emotions and our feelings towards it and our own self-confidence enables an individual to really overcome it in a way that's right for them, if that makes sense. And going back to your question about the voice, I had an adult client who was also a stutterer. And in our work together, something came up from his childhood, which was around not being able to speak his truth or his voice. And so that was really fascinating, that how it took us down that journey and how he ended up kind of pursuing that.
Wow. So I'm stuttering now. So when you are told not to express yourself, your speech will follow so that you don't express yourself?
Well, I think it was probably two things happening at the same time. Likely there was a stutter, and then as well, there was this other component. Again, was it because of the stutter or was it because of the culture and how, it wasn't okay for him to express himself, right?
So interesting.
And so that's another interesting aspect, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my first interest in the topic was actually when I started to prepare to build the studio for this, for slow-mo. Being a techie, of course, I had to build it myself. So I looked at all of the equipment and all of the framing and all of the, the techniques of videography and so on. Techies, we always do that. But I eventually ended up with a photography teacher or a videography teacher on YouTube that used the movie The King's Speech. He was teaching it from the point of view of photography. So basically saying, when the king was in the center of the screen, that was the moment when he was confident and able to speak. When he was on 1/3 of the screen, or when he was in the very far background of the screen, you were minimizing him through videography. And then I watched that movie again, and it really blew me away how the videography was incredible, but the idea of his own confidence as represented in the visual elements of the movie and how that led him to be able to speak eventually, which was more positioned as the voice of a nation, really, rather than just his voice. It's quite touching, really. Yeah. I mean, it is that moment of success, I think, made us all feel amazing about it, even though I'm not a British person and I don't follow the king, and it was time of war and I don't like war and all of that. But it was just that amazing victory, if you want, of finding your voice. So did you have some, of your clients or patients that you got to a moment where they actually changed their life in a way?
Every day it's happening.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, the kind of work that I do, I feel like I'm a vessel really for God's work. Yeah. I mean, that's really how I feel. It's something that I've been drawn to, something I know that I can do well, and something that I feel like I've been used to do. And so, every single hour I'm making an impact. And for me, it's really about, well, I want to see that progress every time a child comes in. And so if that's not happening, what do I need to change? What needs to work? How do I connect in a different way to enable that progress to occur? And so I've had children who've come in, barely saying, a handful of words. And just through the power of play and connection, the power of play and connection. And I tell you, this is the most important element. They have learned to speak in sentences within months. It's just what I realize, whether I'm working with the tiniest child or the oldest client, is that everybody wants to feel connected. Everybody wants to feel heard. Everyone's voice is important. And so when you draw attention to that and when you enable that unlocking through connection, it's magic. It really is magic.
How does that work? What do you mean by connection? So in your experience, how does it look like?
Oh, connection is like I say, the key to unlocking that potential. So a new child comes into my room, the first thing I do, I don't even, really say hello to the parents. I'm down on the floor, eye contact, looking straight at the child, and just knowing that someone's looking right at them, someone's there, someone's present, someone's really trying to understand them. It changes everything, everything. And whether that be at TDCC, the Developing Child Center, where I'm working with kids, whether that be when I'm in a coaching session, right? That just very direct eye contact and smile and the joy of seeing that person just, demonstrated on your face, that changes everything.
I'm a huge advocate of that. Actually, when I normally, a lot of people ask me about my wonderful Aalia and Aya, which I have to say were two remarkable young adults, and Aya is remarkable in so many ways. Ali, when he left us, was just quite impressive. And most people say you must have done something raising them that made them that way. And I don't believe that much, other than one thing, which was exactly this. I really always treated them not just as adults, but like the most important person in the room. So we would have Ali and I, we used to go for Jummah prayers, for example, together or whatever. So we would have that half an hour in the car together going back and forth. And he was a young child, really. And we would have long conversations, like really long conversations where he expresses his points of view. I listen attentively about a video game, for example. It doesn't matter what the topic is, but if it's important to him, I would listen very attentively. And I urge parents to make that their number one priority. I think we normally box our kids either into the box of a burden, like they're annoying and stressful and so on, or the box of a duty where I have to do things for them, or the box of my ego as a protector or provider, so I have to be doing things for them. It's just not what they really are. They're little humans, just little in size, right?
100%. And this is what I teach every day, to parents, is about finding those magical moments for connection,
Yes.
Undistracted moments, right? Where you're completely focused on your child. And even if it's in, 20-minute segments, right? 20, 20, 20, where you're just putting your phone aside and you're just giving them that undivided attention. It's so valuable. And I think also it's just like thinking about the space, right? So for example, I'm in the bath, right? I think, my child is playing with a toy and I have the choice. So thinking about that space, that moment, and that moment can enable a choice that can, lead to connection, right? And so many of us, like you'll see the child is playing, the child is occupied. Okay, I'm just going to pick up my phone and order that toy that I wanted to from Amazon, right? This is a good opportunity. The child is occupied. Well, my invitation is to actually say, okay, use that time, that moment to put the phone down and join in the play with your child. And that is much more valuable. That is what your child wants way more than a new toy from Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, most parents will say that the number one use of an iPad is to get the children to just, leave them alone, right? But I mean, the question really is, what if the child is annoying? Some parents do that because they just are dying for that little break.
So I think that, when it comes to parenting, the journey is your healing as well. Yeah.
Wink.
So, it's not just, you understanding you and understanding your triggers is as important, and for you to be a present parent for your child, right? And what's interesting about what Daniel Siegel says in one of his quotes, which I love, is that there's a stream where there's a flow, right? And in life in general, you want to be in that flow, right? When you veer too much to one side of the bank, there's chaos. When you veer too much to the other side, there's rigidity. So, are we going to spend our time kind of zigzagging between them, right? And then, trying to find that flow, right? So where is it that we can follow our child's lead? Where is it that we can let them lead and give them the opportunity to do so? Where is it that we can find the time and space to, ignite our playful side?
Yeah.
Right? Because we're born with it. You were a child. You used to play, right? So, sometimes giving your permission to just let go is so, so valuable and so important. And of course, there are times when you're going to create boundaries and, do your work or whatever it may be. And yet there are also times where, as a necessity, you have to carve out this time for your children too.
I 100% agree. You went from children to crunch moms, it's called. Yeah. So you're. I think that's a smart move, right? Because basically, if we can teach the moms, we probably are going to get better children. So what was that about?
So I had the pleasure of meeting the founders of Crunch Moms in a strange way, actually. And so it's an amazing, amazing group of women. Julian Liang and Vinny from Crunch Moms were, the four musketeers, and we're really trying to support women in whatever phase of motherhood and career they may be at. So it's, a very dedicated professional platform for women. And we run workshops, we run events every week. We run group coaching sessions and summits. And it really has become just a very, I would say, authentic community. And we're all there just trying to help women find success on their own terms. And so that's been a really, really powerful journey. And I'm running, through the Crunch Moms Designing Your Life workshops, which is an amazing approach out of Stanford. It's a life and career exploration approach. And really, we're trying to move away from the fear of creating your life to the excitement, kind of using the same thinking that created the internet and created a Ferrari and using that.
I don't like Ferraris.
Okay,
did I say that publicly?
Whatever. What's your favorite car?
Did I say that publicly? It doesn't matter what my favorite car is. I actually do not like Ferraris. I think they're overrated. Oh my God, Ferrari will never invite me to speak again. Okay, so did you find a change of topic? No. Did you find that Middle Eastern women are different? Like they have different needs, different career needs, different problems, different challenges, different motherhoods issues?
Yeah, I think we have such a diverse community of women from all over the world, including Emirati women. And, I feel like we connect on our humanity, and we connect on the fact that life is a process and life has its ebbs and its flows. And in that journey, whether, I'm in the Designing Your Life session with someone who's kind of now, retired because they've done so well, or someone who's just starting out their career journey after having kids, everybody is going through a different process at a different time. And so we connect on that, And I think as parents, there are definitely common topics that, that women face. And so we're really trying to target our events and our sessions towards, the questions that they have.
Yeah.
And so I say we connect on what brings us together, if that makes sense.
Well, that was a loaded question.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
part of my
Yeah.
part of my intention with this series, The Remarkable Women of the Middle East, is to sort of contradict CNN and Fox and BBC a little bit of the image of the woman of the Middle East, because I actually think the women of the region are so diverse and so remarkable and so incredibly feminine in every way they take to the world, and in many ways they are completely free to choose in many ways. And I think the world doesn't know that about us. It doesn't know how advanced the woman of the Middle East is. As a matter of fact, every time I go to Saudi Arabia, which has a very conservative image in the global media, I get blown away by incredibly visionary women who are entrepreneurs and successful and, doing really well, very highly educated, incredibly intellectual, incredibly, intelligent, and at the same time, mothers and wives and, and engaged in society in so many ways, taking care of their parents and so on. And I have to say, this loaded question here was to try and say, are there differences? And yes, you're absolutely right. There are differences across everyone in the world, but we're all similar in what we align around. And I think that's something I'm trying to bring more and more to the mind of the listener, if you want. That if you open up to what connects you to others, we're all the same.
Absolutely. And, I'm reading a lot of Joe Dispenza's work at the moment.
Great work. Yeah.
And really it's just, it is about that, nobody and no time, right? And no space. And once you start to see yourself as more than an object, or everything around you is more than an object, and actually there's space and there's energy around everyone. And and that energy has the potential of affecting the energy of somebody else. And, that kind of source, I think it really puts life into perspective, right? We are all connected, and my success is your success, right? And so that's kind of the energy I feel when I'm working with the Crunch Moms as well, is that we're really trying to enable that.
So it seems to me that there are two different approaches here. With Crunch Moms, you're trying to say, let me help you find a path through life. With your, children, therapy, you're sort of trying to fix a problem after it happened. Is that a reasonable analogy?
I would say that the two words that summarize everything are unlocking potential. So to me, it doesn't matter whether you're young and you're facing a speech and language impediment, or whether you're older and you're trying to figure out your life or your work, right? For me, it's about unlocking the beautiful, amazing individual you are, and really unleashing that creativity and that confidence into the world, So that's, I guess, what brings everything together is communication, connection, and coaching, and unlocking potential.
Communication, connection, and coaching. Okay, so we spoke about connection. Communication here is
related to the speech and language, and kind of enabling an individual's voice, right? To the best of their ability to be able to say their truth, right?
So I'll go back to your own story. So it seems to me that when you and Arfan were triggered by one sentence, you had the awareness to be able to do something about it, to say, I need to handle this. Sometimes when our kids, for example, are starting to stutter or whatever, you said that if it persists more than 2 years, it actually is likely to persist. Does that mean that the parents should sort of address the issue very early on if they were to help? What are the signs that you would ask parents to keep an eye on when it comes to speech impediments, and what should they recognize as a reason to go to an expert?
Okay, that's a great question and very important, because early intervention, getting in early, is the way we change the brain most effectively. The brain pathways, I mean, they're always plastic, which means that they're malleable, they're able to change throughout our lives, and yet they're the most potent, where the pathways are forming so quickly in the early years, 0 to 4, that you really want to be getting in as early as possible. So when, someone says that, oh, he'll catch up later, or, my doctor said this, and, we don't need to worry, or I am not of that mindset. My mindset is, well, the earlier we get in, the more effective, any of the treatment will be, leading to more positive outcomes moving forward, and in the confidence of the child as well. So some of this, so there are many different things to keep in mind when you're bringing up your child. One thing that I would say is important to do is to just be mindful of the developmental milestones. So, just know when your child, and write them down, right when your child kind of sat up, started to crawl, started to walk, and just compare them to developmental milestones, not as a means of causing concern, but just as a means of educating yourself on what is normal and what are the normal ranges. For example, a child can take all the way up till 18 months to walk, and that's acceptable, right? Or they can take, up to, a certain age to say the th sound, and that's okay, it's normal. But, if you have, if you're following the developmental milestones, when to ask the questions, and then it might also guide you in terms of who to ask the right questions to. So one thing I tell parents is that you really want to go to the most, using Ray Dalio's term, believable source when it comes to seeking help. So, going to, for example, and this has happened with my own son, so I'm just sharing that, going to an ENT and asking about, your child's language development is not appropriate, because they do,
ENT is what?
like an ear, nose, and throat doctor, because, right? Because I've had to deal with this with my own son, and, and the most believable source is a speech and language pathologist. So go to them when you're concerned about your child's language development, right? And also, a lot of times, parents are seeking guidance, as they should, from, parents, their own parents, from doctors who are generalists, like general doctors, general pediatricians, general teachers. And that's awesome, and that's great. And they're actually able to kind of guide the parent to seeking help. However, sometimes when you are concerned about something in particular, really go with your gut instinct on that, and try and seek the most believable source to answer your question, right? And it may not be the generalist, it may be the specialist when it comes to that.
Is it possible that a speech impediment would happen later in life? So could it be that a child is okay until age 7, and then by age 7 something traumatizing happens, and then they catch?
So usually, typically the trigger for example, for stutter will happen before the age of 7, right? However, you can have acquired speech and language impediments, right? Like, isn't it Demi Moore's ex-husband, famous actor. Why can't I think of his name?
Don't ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he has aphasia. So, for example,
it's good that I remembered who Demi Moore is when you spoke about that. Yeah.
So he has aphasia. So he had, I think it was secondary to a stroke, for example, and that affected the language areas of the brain, which means it affects his ability to communicate. Right. Other people who've had, traumatic brain injury, and that's affected their ability to communicate and speak, and maybe other cognitive areas as well. So there is stuff that can happen later on in life that could affect your ability to communicate. And for children, I guess likely sometimes a child may be, labeled, or, something that they were able to kind of brush over as children end up becoming a lot more paramount and a lot more obvious as they get older. And so at that point, an individual may seek a diagnosis. So I have a friend whose husband, recently got diagnosed as on the spectrum, after spending many, many years not realizing and not knowing that. That's the reason why,
I know so many
right?
of those. Yeah. I mean,
so
working in the tech space.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We all were on the spectrum. Yeah. It's quite a brain design, I would say. Yeah. So, and then when it comes to women, what do you think the triggers are? When should a woman start to work on design your life type of approach?
So, it really is an amazing approach to enable fulfillment, joy, meaning in your life. So, like I said, in the best of circumstances, we may live to 100, the 100-year life. And so therefore, in that 100-year life, we're going to go through, different stages. And so, like I said, for me, it may be that I'm just starting out a new career after having a career for a while. It may be that I've retired and I have, like 40 more years to live because I'm not going to die till 100. So how are you going to design that end of your life, right? And so it can come at different segments, different moments in time. And I would say a lot of, women who are really curious about the program feel like they're stuck, feel like they're looking for more meaning, they're looking for more connection, they're looking for more fulfillment in their lives. They are feeling, like they're just disengaged at work or they're not happy where they are. And these are some of the reasons why they may really seek the Designing Your Life program. Or they're going through some kind of a transition, whether it mean that they want a promotion at work, or whether that mean that, they've just gone through some kind of a loss or whatever it may be, or they've just become a new parent. And so they're dealing with that kind of transition too. Yeah.
So with that, I am extremely grateful for your time. I normally close my my conversations, as much as I remember, by asking about happiness. And, in a very interesting way, the work that you do is almost always trying to get us to our potential, if you want. It's part of that potential to be happy. And if that is the case, what would be your top advice?
So I think for me, and this is part from the Designing Your Life program as well, is about finding alignment. Yeah? Alignment. So who you are, what you do, what you believe, that triangle, which is from the DYL program, is about how you find happiness in this moment in time. Yeah. And so I think that's quite powerful. And of course that triangle can change depending on
Did they write about that already?
Yes. They
Damn.
did write about it already.
I thought I invented this. I swear I didn't know about this. I call it the mind, heart, and action alignment. If your mind and heart and actions are not aligned, then you're basically not going to find happiness. You're not true to yourself.
Yeah. And I think also it's just the mindset of realizing that you're in this beautiful world, and you've been blessed to be here, and knowing that you get to design your life.
Do you really? I mean, most people will say, I don't have that luxury at all.
And true. And it can be sometimes a privilege and a luxury to feel like you can. However, you do have the freedom of designing your mindset as well, right? So no matter what situation you're in, right? Whether it be you're in the middle of what we call in DYL a gravity problem, someone in your family is a victim of the earthquake, or you're stuck in that situation in Syria, whatever it may be, God forbid, you're having to accept that and design a different mindset around it in order to find happiness, right? Otherwise, it's very easy to choose unhappy rather than to choose happy, yeah? And actually something that keeps, from your book, that I keep telling myself when I'm in a difficult situation is like, choose happy. Just choose
Absolutely.
it, right? And sometimes everyone will tell me, it's not just a switch. I'm like, well, actually, maybe it is just a switch,
It really
right?
is. It absolutely is. Yeah. I mean, just that choice of happy. I mean, in many ways, like the examples that you gave, so many of us are so blessed, but focused on the negative point. Yeah. Like, I think everyone should literally chant every morning, I'm not in Syria, I'm not in Syria, I'm not in Syria, I'm not in Syria, right? Just remind yourself of that. I'm not in an earthquake. I'm not, human trafficked somewhere. I'm not. Life can be so challenging and difficult. And yet most of us are focusing on the traffic or focusing on something that my partner said or whatever. I call those problems of privilege, in all honesty. Even if you lose a job, which I know is nowadays is something that's happening so frequently, Yes, that means you had a job. So many people didn't for so long. That means you at least hopefully you still have a place to stay. You still have people that you're connected to. There's always someone who's struggling more, and I find it so interesting that we don't choose to remember that, don't choose to be happy about it and grateful for it. Yeah. Yeah. I am very grateful that you came to be my guest. I'm very, very, very grateful for your time and for your knowledge and for your passion for what you do. It's really, really contagious. Yeah.
It was such a pleasure for me to be here as well. And thank you very, very much. And one thing that I just want to say about passion, if I can end with that, can I?
Of course.
Is that, we think about passion. It's like Elizabeth Gilbert, I think she interviewed and with someone, and she said that, well, instead of trying to follow your passion or find your passion, instead follow your curiosity. And I think that's just a really nice way of taking the pressure off, like finding that one thing you're supposed to do or the one thing that's supposed to make you happy, and rather just really take that curiosity for a walk and explore, what makes you happy as well. So.
Oh, I love that, actually. I really do. I think that's a very good way to end, actually. Follow your curiosity, because I will tell you openly, in the West, we normally take life as a target. It's like a point in the future that I will determine without really knowing anything about life. I'm going to be the best lawyer that ever existed. And you're not even a lawyer yet when you make those choices. And then you chase that point and make it your life's purpose. And then when anyone tells you what's your life purpose, you defend it with your life. That's my life's purpose. When in reality, curiosity actually is a very, very interesting life purpose in itself. It's like, I'm going to explore every possible part of life. I'm going to explore what life throws my way. I'm going to explore myself. I'm going to explore the match between those. I think that's a beautiful way of putting it, actually, a beautiful sentence to end on. But of course, as I will have to remind my listeners, to be able to follow your curiosity, you probably have to provide a little bit of slow down time. You have to allow yourself the space to be curious. You have to allow yourself the space to ponder, to reflect. And so, yeah, as I always tell you, it doesn't matter how busy your life makes you think you are. There's always a tiny bit of time to slow down. I'm really, really grateful for your time. I'm grateful for all of you listeners for giving me the opportunity to meet with so many amazing people. I said that a million times before, but maybe you're new here. So please do the stuff that they do on social media. Go and rate the podcast 5 stars, or refer it to someone and send it to someone that you like, or post about it on social media, or just call your dearest friend and say, this was a nice conversation, you should listen to it. Help us reach more people so that we can together make a bigger difference. I love you all for listening, and I will see you next time.